Quarters of the folks here online. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sarah McDonald, and I'm currently on the Education Committee of AFP Nova Scotia, and also sit on the board. And so as an organization and as a chapter, we really want to make sure that folks can stay connected and also learning in this time. And some of the feedback that we received in the last two sessions was just to keep it under that hour so that we're really respectful of everyone's time, making it kind of a brown bag lunch. So we're really encouraging everybody to grab their lunch, hang out. You don't have to have the video on if you don't want to. We're just trying to make sure that it's as accessible and easy to log in as possible. And so that as many people can reap the rewards as they can. So thank you for everybody who's logged on. It's really awesome. A couple of housekeeping items. It looks like most people have figured out Zoom in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, but just make sure that your video is muted when you're not speaking. There will definitely be times to interact with David and obviously unmute at that point. But just for like dogs, mail people, kettles going, all that kind of stuff. And there's also a chat function as well. So if you don't want to necessarily pipe up in the middle of a sentence or something like that, there's a chat function along the bottom of the Zoom chat, and you can ask whatever you want, and David and I can kind of keep an eye on that. And just wanted to make sure that if anybody out there isn't an AFP member, welcome. We designed these sessions specifically so that everybody could join and also learn about a little bit more about the sector and our work here as in the charitable sector. So welcome for that. So I'm just going to do a little intro about David. So Euler Consulting works with organizations and allied sector professionals to effectively deliver their programs and services. Services include practical guidance on CRA policy for registered charities, fundraising and revenue generation development, assistance for organizations seeking to register as a charity, and meeting facilitation. And David's been really generous with his time in the past. He's done different sessions with AFP Nova Scotia before, and we're really grateful to have him again today donating his time. So thank you very much, David, and I'll leave it to you.
Great, thank you, Sarah, and hello to everybody. So I initially connected with Daphne, I think, very sort of early in the days of what we're dealing with, just with the idea of, I think lots of fundraising folks are dealing with, immediate consequences of perhaps fundraising events being postponed or canceled, or potentially being postponed and canceled, and campaigns and what to do with those. And not that I had any particular good ideas or answers, but I thought it would be a great idea perhaps to kind of have a group discussion primarily, see how everybody else is doing, coping, maybe share some ideas and thoughts and suggestions and all that good stuff. So very much planning for this to be an interactive type of presentation. So I'll go through a few slides and have a few suggestions and comments, and after each slide then I'll certainly open up the floor to comments and questions, and hopefully everybody can maybe provide some ideas and share some of their knowledge. So we're going to walk through 6 different topics. First one is the timelines that we're dealing with, short-term and long-term timelines, and what needs to be considered. Look at answering the question, is it the right time to fundraise? I'm sure that's, we're all asking that question. Third topic is assessing your financial situation, and I'm sure everybody has been doing that. If it wasn't on the timetable to do it immediately, I'm sure lots of folks are doing that, and what that looks like from a fundraising perspective. Number 4, we looked at canceled and postponed events. This seems to be the biggest immediate topic in the fundraising world. Looking at canceled or postponed campaign and annual campaigns. I think we've already heard some major ones were immediately canceled, the Daffodil campaign, I believe, and perhaps some comments and suggestions around that. And then some closing comments on the emergency wage subsidy and how that relates specifically to the fundraising side of things, and perhaps some other government benefits that are available if you haven't already looked into those. So what is the timeline of the crisis that we're dealing with? And probably my guess is as good as anybody else's. I think right now I would suggest looking at what would be a minimum of what we're looking at, I guess, the extreme measures of social distancing and whether there's going to be any kind of loosening in those. And right now, I think we're looking at towards the end of June as a reasonable measure based on what we're hearing from government officials. Hopefully, I mean, I think everybody is getting pretty tired of this. But again, my guess is as good as anybody's, that perhaps we may get through the immediacy of dealing with this, and then the effect that it's had on our lives, perhaps, you know, by the start of summer. Once that's done, I think it's understood that it's going to be a slow process of sort of reintroducing normalcy, whatever that might look like. And, you know, I'm not sure how long it's going to take till we sort of feel that we're sort of back on normal footing. And maybe, you know, that's up to 1 year of recovery after sort of, you know, the end of June. And then the other major one, I'm sure, is on top of mind is long-term changes to the fundraising landscape. What is going to be the new normal in the big picture, and what's going to be the new normal for charities? What's going to be the new normal in the fundraising world, and specifically special events, large gatherings? Are we going to even have those? What's that all going to look like? So that's my comments on the timeline. Does anybody else have any questions or comments on those? Please add them. All right, nobody has any inside information to add to the timeline side of things. Again, I think it's pretty self-explanatory that it's a bit of a guesswork, but I think for the sake of planning, look at that you know, minimum of 3 months of dealing with this, you know, very, very different environment that we're working with. So maybe this will prompt a little bit more discussion. Is it the right time to fundraise? Obviously, many people are financially strained with the immediate layoffs that they're dealing with. Also, the stock market has taken a large hit, and that is creating a lot of anxiety for folks who perhaps don't see their weekly paychecks being reduced or eliminated at this point, but that may affect their motivation to want to give in the near future. There's also many charity services that are front and center and certainly top of mind, and their services are immediately needed, such as food banks and Meals on Wheels and mental health services. So I think there has been, I'll mention it later, but United Way has started a fund immediately for services that would be specifically COVID related. So certainly people may be still willing to donate in these days, but perhaps their mindset is more so the emergency funding that's needed. Such similar to, you know, when something like an earthquake happens and the Red Cross is front and center in people's minds and tends to bring in a lot more money towards immediately helping those folks in need. So the question is, if you are able to potentially do fundraising, if you still have staff in place, does it make sense to wait and see until we're maybe past the immediate short-term things we're dealing with? Or do you try to just continue on and see what other revenues you can bring in? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Daphne, Sarah, how about yourselves? What perhaps your...
Well, yeah, so my situation is a little different because I'm not really able to actively fundraise, but I've definitely been looking at who's doing it well and who's able to really capture the audience and the need of the community. And I think there's a valuable piece to a lot of our work. It doesn't matter if it's very naturally direct or not. And just in our community, I think the United Way has done a very, very good job at positioning themselves as someone who can help in the community. And that's not, maybe that's like a little bit more of a given. But on the other side of things, the QE2 Foundation has done an amazing job setting up a fund specifically to support people who have been affected by COVID-19. And I thought it was very interesting. I don't know all the details, so I'd encourage people to go look at it. But I just thought it was very interesting that it supports people that might be affected. It's not necessarily people who have COVID-19. It's not necessarily healthcare professionals. But if people are otherwise affected within their hospital system, you know, maybe it's that you can't see a loved one or something like that, right? Because of
Right.
and so I just thought they did a really good job at looking at where the gaps were and very quickly and very effectively acting on that. So I just thought that was a really great example. And then obviously the United Ways Fund is another really good one too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
where it's sorry, it's Allison.
Yeah.
We are actually, I'm with the hospital foundation as well, and we've been playing around with the idea because this is the time that we would generally send out our spring appeal, and so the big dilemma was, you know, do we do it? Do we not do it? And we decided to do it, but with a really soft ask, because we are finding that a lot of our donors do want to be involved. You know, they're at home and they want to help, but they don't know how to help. And so we've created a fund as well for helping fund some equipment that's in need for when we hit our peak with COVID-19 on the South Shore. And so we're going to make a soft ask, but it's going to be interesting to try it out because we're asking for both of the hospitals that we fundraise for at one time, and we've never done that before. So it's also kind of a time to do something that's not traditionally what we do.
Hmm.
And I guess for me, I had put a little note there in the chat. So yeah, I think we should keep communicating with our donors. For me, I work for the Canadian Museum of Immigration at Pier 21, so it's not exactly maybe top of mind for folks to give at this time, but then again, we don't want people to forget about the charities out there that perhaps aren't on the front lines and aren't as quite relevant right now. So I would suggest that we keep in touch with our donors. They want to hear from us, but maybe just have your ask prepared. Like keep working your timelines. Maybe they might move out a little bit more, but we need to be prepared for when we do get back in the regular routine. We can't put everything on hold. So, but I'd say keep reaching out to your donors and giving them a little check-in.
Right. Right.
I think that would be the same for us. I work with the Cobequid Health Center Foundation. So what we've been really doing is actively calling our donors, telling them how our services are impacted, offering to help them navigate what's going on in healthcare. So if they need blood collection or whatever, sort of opening up that they can call us. And we found that pretty valuable. A lot of people were really concerned about our blood collection being by appointment only and things like that. And I find, especially with our senior volunteers, it's been a great way to like open those conversations and tell them what we're doing. We are actually fundraising for 5 pieces of equipment to help with COVID because we're expanding our emergency department by 50%. So just telling them about that. And in telling them about that, that's turned into some donations over the phone. So that's pretty much what we've been doing. But we've been also doing interviews with our frontline staff, and we've done a social media campaign called Doing Your Part, and doing a lot about profiling the people that are on the front lines and just trying to really help with that, because if we go to do a staff campaign in the future, it'll just help by building relationships and providing support to them. And also just trying to make sure that we're enforcing the measures. So we've been doing that a lot in terms of it. We do have a COVID-19 response fund as well. And we've seen, you know, lots of support that way. So just mainly communicating, but I don't think that I've actually asked anybody directly for funds. I've been more giving them information and leaving it to them. So, and that's worked pretty well for us right now, as well as we can expect, I guess.
One thing that I didn't mention and I wanted to say was people are reaching out and wanting to help. So while there are definitely certain people that are going to, I don't know, be uncomfortable with asking, it's kind of like the role of charities to give that to our donors as well, to be able to help out in some way. Because if you're stuck in your home, you're not going to be able to go volunteer. You're not going to be able to support folks in other ways. And if you are in a financial position to give, then it does give them that benefit and that service to connect them with the community. And Rhonda over at SMU, shout out to SMU alum, and worked there forever. They did set up a student bursary fund, and she's absolutely correct. I got those emails and everything as well. And I think that was a great initiative and a really good example of directing the funds to what's needed right now. So obviously, the university calling and saying, hi, can you give to a capital campaign right now? Probably wouldn't be ideal. But diverting those funds to the folks that really need it right now, based on what's going on with all the international students and all the students at that university that would really need support, is a great initiative. And they've made it really personal. Like, there were quotes in the email and that sort of thing. So that's a great example too.
Yeah, and I think as the few comments here have shown, certainly something that's tied into dealing with the immediate situation is certainly, there's no reason not to bring that to the attention of your donors and the general public. I tried to volunteer for 3 places to deliver food. There was an ask from Meals on Wheels. They said immediately that they had lost a lot of their drivers. So I had called them, and they said, based on that, the media attention they got, they had more people than they needed. So I'm on like 3 waiting lists just to help out just driving. But it does show that, there's lots of people who want to help out. And unfortunately, given the social distancing things, that those are limited. So perhaps a financial donation can maybe help people feel that they are giving. Is there anybody on the call who's in the position where we our programs and services, there's sort of nothing that ties into dealing with the immediate circumstances, but we are going to have felt an immediate anxiety about our normal fundraising and delivering our services that we feel we're hoping not will get lost in the shuffle. I mean, I think that's what a lot of charities are dealing with is we don't want perhaps our youth who are helped by our programs being left behind as sort of everything sort of gets so focused on COVID. Is there anybody in the call who's sort of wondering about we don't have anything specific to COVID, but we'd like to continue fundraising, or we're not sure? Is there anybody who has sort of asking that question right now on the call and wants to make a comment? Okay. I mean, I think my suggestion would be is that again, you can weigh sort of the effort and the resources you have in place to continue on with your fundraising as normal. I think it doesn't hurt to continue to put out those asks, and we'll walk through. And it's already been mentioned by a few people here. It becomes more of a bit of a soft ask. And certainly one of the recommendations is to reach out to your donors and ask them, make it a 2-way communication, ask them how are they doing, and find out what's going on in their life, because I'm sure like everybody else, it's a little bit upside down right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't want to make, that normal donation that they might make in previous years. So, all right, any more comments on the question of, is it the right time to fundraise, before we move on? Okay.
Oh, Dave, I was going to just mention
sure.
that donors might be giving to charities that they wouldn't normally give to right now. I know I am. And we had mentioned there's been different emails and different social media links about, the fact that you try to give, say, your coffee change or your commuting costs with gasoline. We're all saving some money here and there for those of us who can. So, that's relevant too. I think that, there's people out there who want to give maybe to the arts, like Neptune for instance, has had to cancel, or God knows when they're going to be able to put on their performances. So
Right.
the arts community might not be as relevant right now for people to think of, like me, who works at a museum, but there's programs that go on, and there's actors and all those who are working in the arts right now. So I think, you know, those in the arts community and similar organizations need to think that there are donors out there who would like to, you know, to perhaps put some funds their way right now, who might not normally think of those organizations.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point.
That reminded me of something, if you don't mind. Something that I thought was really interesting and kind of like a flip is I actually have a lot of friends that work in the service industry. And a couple of, now of course, politics and all that sort of thing. So use it as like a guide of the style of giving. But the Blue Lobster company that does Blue Lobster, like just the cocktails, right? Here in Nova Scotia, they actually donated product and money to servers and folks in the serving industry because they're losing so much income. And I thought that was a really interesting flip of thinking about, okay, you know, these folks are in need right now. They're usually the folks that are, you know, slinging our product, whatever. And how can we give back? And it might be interesting for certain charities to think that way, just who are our partners and who usually supports us, and how could we work with them to, you know, have a good news story and also support some of our staff or volunteers or program users or things like that. So, I mean,
Yep.
it is, you know, partnering with the food bank to get products out to kiddos at Phoenix Youth or something like that, you know, like
Right.
it and use it how you see fit. But I thought that was interesting because, you know, you're not thinking about a bartender, but obviously they're having a hard time too. And the folks that are selling those products are thinking of that. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought that was neat.
Yeah. You know, it's, I think they say there's two industries that are sort of, you know, recession proof, or, you know, not that we're in a recession, but I think they're predicting one. But, you know, this immediate economic crisis, you know, one is the mafia. They always seem to do good business regardless of the economic situation, and charities, you know, and perhaps we do even better. But it just takes a different form. You know, perhaps it's a lot more volunteer work being done, or perhaps it's a lot more, you know, money being given that normally wouldn't be given. So yeah, I think it's you know, not necessarily the time just to assume that that perhaps your charity isn't going to do well throughout this, if you're not necessarily having something directed specifically for the COVID situation. So moving on to assessing your financial needs, and obviously that's probably, as you guys are well aware, a best practice. You know, is you know, planning for the year, revisiting your financial plan, and subsequently your fundraising plan throughout the year. And obviously most organizations, I would think by now, have revisited their financials and dealing with the immediacy of either an immediate decrease in fundraising revenues, or your fee-for-service program has been stopped, or your programs and services that you do normally offer, you can't anymore due to the social distancing rules. So I think it's obviously best practice to revisit those. I think if you are going to be approaching donors, that you have shown that you've revisited your financial needs, and you've indicated you've got an idea of, you know, what our immediate financial needs are going to be in this you know, perhaps 3 to 4 month window, that requires us to still, you know, continue on with our fundraising. We know that perhaps everything's are top of mind, but if your organization is, you know, wants to continue on with your programs and services, you've identified that, you know, given that we just can't handle a stop in our fundraising revenues over this time. So I think that I think donors always want to see good due diligence from their charities, and especially at this time that you've you know, really approaching them with a real reason. There are, as we've mentioned, some very specific COVID-related programs and services that if you are offering those, that there's some funds, perhaps the United Way has started the Atlantic Compassion Fund. Now, I looked at it yesterday, and I think they said they're doing it again, sort of releasing the funds in stages. So they're not necessarily releasing funds right now, but always have a look at their website, I guess, in terms of that. The federal government has been approached to release some emergency federal funds, and I think they're asking for $8 billion, something along those lines. Whether those are going to be a combination of specific for COVID-related programs or services, or a combination of that plus the clear, clear concept that lots of charities have seen an immediate drop in their fundraising revenues, due to canceled events and campaigns, and assisting with those. The general idea of the government funding is to try to keep the money flowing, try to keep people employed, or at least giving them a paycheck if they're staying at home and still earning one. So that's kind of the same mindset with the charity emergency fund that they're looking for, is to try to keep the business of charities going as best as possible. Obviously, the YMCA is a perfect example of one that their programs and services, due to the new normal, have been stopped for now, but lots of other charities could still deliver their programs and services as normal, but without the fundraising coming in, they're going to have to stop or delay those. The other question I had, and perhaps somebody can answer this, is an opportunity to reassign program funding. So I'm not sure if any groups here have programs that they've had to stop because of COVID, or postpone them, and whether that has affected your program funding, or if you already had the program funding in place for the year, how are charities dealing with that? Is that something that can be deferred? Do you have to give it back? I wonder, could it be assigned? If you could take, program funding that's clearly not going to be used, until further notice, but perhaps we could assign it to another program or service that would normally be funded by our fundraising activities. Any comments on that? Does anybody, does that makes any sense to even broach that subject?
I can speak to that. This is Whitney. I'm from NSCC. So we actually, that was one of our first approaches. Rather than approaching people for new funding for students, we actually reassigned funding for programs that weren't going to exist now that students aren't on campus. So our first approach was to go through all of our funds that exist and reach out to those donors and ask them if we could use the funding redirected towards emergency bursaries, or a lot of our students need computers and internet access. So we asked them if we could redirect all of that funding to those immediate needs. And our donors were really receptive, and all of the ones that we reached out to agreed. And that was how we actually ended up receiving additional funds from some donors too. Because when we reached out and told them about the need without even asking, they already upped their giving level. And so that's basically the approach we've been taking, is just notifying our donors of those changes. And then any gifts that come in from that is kind of like a bonus to us.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I probably doesn't hurt to ask. And as you pointed out, you've had some success with it. So if that's something that is somewhat applicable to your organization, it sounds like, worth inquiring into to see if that's a possibility. Any other comments on that? Okay, so moving forward here. Special events, and I think this is, as far as I can tell, one of the biggest consequence of COVID on the fundraising world was many special events had to be postponed or canceled. So a few comments and questions that have come up, and suggestions is, number one, if you've already sold tickets to your events, should you refund them, or the obvious idea is perhaps turn that into a donation, or perhaps reduce the ticket price to whatever the donated amount would have been from the tickets, and see if the ticket purchaser would like to make that that donation and give a receipt. So that seems like a pretty much of a no-brainer, and certainly from CRA's perspective, I think that's you know, there's going to be no issue with turning a ticket into a donation and giving out the receipt. Perhaps there's the opportunity to switch to an online appeal. You know, very simple. I'm sure anybody who'd been approached about the event or your mailing list would certainly understand that the event cannot be held, but perhaps they would like to simply, you know, make a donation in lieu of purchasing a ticket or supporting the event in previous ways that they have before. Sunk costs comes up if you have already committed to purchasing some of the expenses for your event, and the supplier unfortunately cannot offer you know, to cancel that. You know, certainly ask for the refund, or perhaps offer that if they could give the money back, that could be turned into a donation, and they could give a tax receipt, and they could get some sort of benefit from that transaction. You know, I think a lot of folks would be perhaps you know, very sympathetic with that situation, but perhaps anybody might have a comment on that. And the you know, the alternative is lots of folks are talking about turning it into, I'm sure it's sort of the term social distance. I'm sure nobody wants to hear that any more than they have to these days, but the idea would be turning into something that you could live stream your event using a platform like this, and as an alternative. So you could still do the live entertainment perhaps, or, you know, your speakers, something along those lines, and do it via an online platform as an alternative, and give folks some of the you know, some of the experience of the event on its own. So any questions on that? Is there some folks who've had that exact situation that they've had to postpone or cancel their events, and had some run into these situations, or they've done something differently to perhaps make sure that that the revenues are still coming in some respect, and other things that have come up? I'd love to hear any comments.
Yeah, for me, I had my annual gala event scheduled for April the 24th. So probably a couple weeks before, you know, all this hit, when March break was happening, just a couple weeks before that, we started putting a plan in place that maybe we would have to cancel or postpone. So we did have a timeline and a plan B in place, and had to activate that plan, obviously. And we do have it scheduled for the beginning of November. Fortunately, the museum has our own space, so there weren't a lot of hard costs that we were on the hook for, but I understand that others might have, well, including our Maritime Fundraising Conference. We had to also cancel that for 2020. Some of you have probably heard that news, and it's unfortunate, but we've worked with our hotel, and as Dave suggested, you know, there are opportunities for refund. In our case, we brought it forward to the next year with our, but the big one, Dave, that I think of is sponsorship, and that's a little bit of a hard one. For me, I was able to postpone my event. Who knows if that's even going to be happening, with the fact that people might not want to sit down at a dinner table together. But the sponsors, they were all very supportive for my gala event at the museum. But what if you did have to refund the funds back for sponsorship? That's not easy, you know, but keep the lines of communication open. So like I said, they were all very understanding in both cases. For the Maritime Fundraising Conference, which was to take place the first part of June, as most of you know, and then for my event as well. I don't sell a whole lot of tickets. A lot of it is sponsor related, and they get their tables, and a lot of guests, as we know in the Maritimes, don't buy their tickets until the last minute anyway. So, but I offered those options to our sponsors and our donors if they wanted to have a refund or turn it into a donation. But this thing about the virtual event kind of scares me a little, that maybe we might have to, even in November, have our event virtually. So got to put a plan in place, if plan C, and that might be the way it has to go. And we know that the revenue is not going to be the same, right? I mean, we all need to lower our expectations.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a good point about the sponsors, and certainly, any opportunity that to, do the event or give them some level of recognition if the event is completely canceled or postponed, and yeah, try to keep the sponsors on board is certainly something to give some thought to. You know, just sort of spitballing my own mind when, I wonder if a new norm may be that you accompany any kind of live event, if we do get some sense of normalcy back, that we do get back to the old school special events, that perhaps you live stream the event anyway and offer it online just as a way to expand your audience, which would make your sponsors happy. Just create a bit more of a buzz, that kind of thing, get more people involved. So it wouldn't be maybe not necessarily an either or, it would be a combination, that once you get a sense of this online thing is somewhat easy to do, perhaps we'll just always accompany anything, our live events with an online version of it. So any other comments about canceling or postponing an event? Okay. So the other side of the equation was that you have something upcoming, that you really didn't necessarily start to plan, but moving forward, everything's up in the air, as Daphne's pointed out, that even something in September, October, or November, you have to start thinking about, are we going to be able to hold what would be our normal event? So again, look at holding something online, or just make it a straight online appeal, with people understanding that's the new norm. I wonder about kind of an online event. If your event was a golf scramble, could you do something online, an online version of a golf scramble, and get everybody participating and all that fun? Or are there some other kind of gaming activity that's out there? Perhaps, again, maybe have a little competition, that kind of stuff. And again, you've still got the same level of participation. Hopefully, there's still the same opportunity for sponsors to get involved and get their name out there amongst the participants, and all that stuff that goes with it. And the opportunity to adjust sponsor benefits. So perhaps you maybe aren't going to get that large sponsor if you do an online thing, but always there perhaps would be a new market for these types of things, and give that some thought too. The other one is an online auction. Those are popular now anyway, but that might be an even more popular, again, if anything to do with gatherings is still going to be a bit of a question mark. So again, if you do have something upcoming the next six months to a year, some things to start to think about. Any comments on that? Does anybody sort of in that situation, what they're kind of have to sort of sit down and try to figure out, what we're going to be doing in the next 6 months or a year with our special events?
So for us, we're having an online auction. Like the month of May is normally Cobequid month. We've moved it to September, and I'm still not sure if that's going to be great. With our online auction, some of the things that we've already solicited are trapped inside of businesses that are closed and not responding. So that's been a little bit of a concern. Our presenting sponsor is closed and they're not responding. So there's a few little things with our online auction that haven't been going as straightforward as we would like to. Lots of places said, yes, we'll donate these items. We don't know what they are and they're closed. So we're just trying to sort of navigate that landscape, but definitely our online auction. We have found that the companies that we do get a hold of though, they're very, very responsive, because our online auction is going to our COVID relief fund. So a lot of people are interested in giving goods and services because they're finding that easier than cash at this point in time, because they do have stock. So there's sort of double-edged sword there. Some companies are giving and they're really, really good. Other stuff is trapped at their businesses and we don't know what they are. So it's causing a few little concerns there, but overall we're moving ahead with that.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I guess maybe try to ensure you can get the actual item in your hands before you offer it. Yeah, it's unfortunate that, gosh, there's not too many things in life that aren't being affected, and we kind of maneuver our way through this as we find out, okay, I guess that's a little bit different, along with many other things. So any other?
Sharon Colchester at the Hospital Foundation in Truro. We're in much the same situation, and actually we've canceled our golf tournament for June, and we just canceled our gala for December. Part of the reasoning for that was, even if we thought we were coming out of COVID-19 and out of restrictions, we really thought our business community was going to need some time to recover. And we have an online auction that we do through that gala, but it's so heavily dependent on community support that we've decided we're going to communicate with all of them, indicating that we know that they're struggling, having challenges and so on, and that's been a significant reason why we've decided to hold off on this year. We do have a couple of other smaller events that we had just started doing that we're currently looking to see if we can take those ones online. For one, we'd already sold the tickets, it was sold out. So whether or not we offer the option, you can opt out for a donation, a refund, or to do the online. We are exploring that now, and we're just trialing a few things right now, but hoping that within the next month, we will have some things that are active. And hopefully people will still be starved for something to do online and say, yeah, we're going to participate in that.
All right, great, thank you. Any other comments?
How far out are people canceling events with their own organizations?
Sorry, once more?
How far out are people canceling events? Like those that do have events, how far out? So Sharon just mentioned she's canceling her event to December. What is the state of other people? How far out are you canceling your event?
Well, I saw that AFP Toronto, this was a couple of weeks ago, had canceled all of their workshops right into June, which is kind of what we took our cue from AFP, was that our our conference was June 7th and 8th, the beginning of June. And when I saw that come out, but as far as fundraising events, I'm not certain. I haven't heard too much. Mine is scheduled November the 6th, and I also have one November the 5th as well at the museum. Two fundraising events are back to back. I don't know how I did that. And but I think, Stacy, that people may not still be comfortable in public gatherings. And I think that's where Sharon was coming in as well, that how comfortable will people be? Our tables are tables of 8 at my gala dinner and not 10, because it needs to have a little bit more elbow room. It's a wine dinner. But I don't know, if I make it a table of 4, I don't think people may not still be comfortable in November to sit together in tables of 4, right? So I have to do, like I said, sort of a plan C where we think about a virtual event even in November.
Yeah, that's a lot of what we're talking about. That's kind of where my question is coming from, because we have an event end of October. We haven't canceled it yet, but I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of reluctance to get together. So I just wanted to have some other folks' thoughts.
I'd like to hear from some other people. Pipe up, don't be shy, or use the chat.
I can say that in Truro, we just had this discussion at a committee meeting on Thursday, sent it out to the board as a whole on Thursday evening, and by Friday, 100% of the board had said, yeah, absolutely, December is off the table.
I think one of the takeaways would be from this is, the gathering portion of it needs to be given a lot of thought to. Obviously, does that at the end of the day affect your ability to hold the events or make the appeal if everybody else is in the same boat? So instead of 20 invitations to scramble golf tournaments and galas coming across somebody's desk in their business office, it's 20 online appeals and asks that are being made. So everybody's in the same boat. So I think the idea that somebody isn't going to enjoy a nice evening of food and entertainment, and therefore will not, want to make their normal, contribution to your organization. I think that's all going to be, necessarily not necessarily the case. I think everybody's going to understand that, yeah, you still need to raise your money. So, normally we, put $200 in for our golf team. We're happy to make that $200 donation. Or perhaps if you've calculated that at the end of the day, the $200 golf entry fee is $100 actually goes to the cause. Once everything costs are taken away, yeah, we're happy to make that straight out $100 donation. So I wouldn't necessarily, remove the opportunity to make those appeals to your normal donors. And if you have a little bit of time to get creative, and come up with something that may capture somebody's attention. Again, if you can get some really good entertainment on, and do that online, that might be, again, that's our normal right now, is everything is online. So you may think that a performance online is nothing close to the live one, but that might not even be a reality until who knows. So so that'd be my suggestion, if that makes sense. So any other comments on special events? Okay. So the other major one that that is being affected, I think, is annual campaigns, or people that were looking to introduce some sort of campaign. Again, the major one that I heard of was the Daffodil campaign being completely canceled by the Cancer Society. And that really gets again into the question of when's the right time to ask, because campaign is specifically, it's nothing associated with an event or anything like that. It's the ask of simple ask of money. And so revisiting the immediate idea that perhaps COVID is top of mind with folks, and that's what they maybe want to focus on. Again, I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. Perhaps you can give some thought to what will the donor environment look like in 3, 6, 12 months. Again, perhaps I have no idea. Maybe nobody really does, and maybe that's the answer, is that we just don't know what it's going to look like at those time frames. How does that affect our finances going forward? I think if you haven't seen some of the things that I'm getting from some charities is this two-way communication is first and foremost. Hey, how are you doing? Tough times, and empathizing that everybody's dealing with this, and more so than others. Maybe but at the end of the day, you're looking for again an ask, a bit of a soft one, is perhaps the best way to go about it. And again, again, I'm sure most groups are trying to do this, trying to figure out their financial objectives for the next, say, perhaps 6 to 12 months. If what we're dealing with is these extraordinary circumstances for up to a year, and how what that means for your financial situation, so that can be easily communicated again to your donors, to say, we've done our due diligence, here's what we think we need to do, and we still need to bring in money, so this is why we're making this approach. So any thoughts on that? Is there groups that have had to wonder about canceling their annual campaigns if they've already done it, or trying to figure out what to do with that? Anybody?
We've pushed off any campaigns that aren't related to urgent aid funding up to 6 months right now. We've pushed off anything that we had in the pipeline, and we're just focusing on immediate financial need for students.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Any other comments, Daphne, yourself, on the topic?
Yeah, for us, we have once a direct mail campaign in the fall. So we're still planning on moving forward with that. The messaging may be different, obviously, but we don't have any plans to, not to do our usual direct mail appeal.
Sure.
One of our guests, Diane Chisholm, mentioned about planned giving. So I don't know if anyone runs a planned giving campaign or if it's just sort of an ongoing piece, but I think that there's some sensitivities probably right now in regards to planned giving, but I think it's probably more top of mind for some than it has been before.
Yeah, certainly, major gifts and planned giving, that, perhaps the drop in the stock market would be have a change, perhaps some priorities and those sorts of things. I have a little bit of a background in the financial side of things, so take this with a grain of salt. But the expectation is that the markets usually bounce back from these types of things, and that the immediate drop that it took was, not surprisingly, the way the market works, a bit of a panic and a bit of an overreaction. Once things start to stabilize, and that normally, those things will come back. So perhaps if you are sensitive to a donor, and perhaps they're worried about that, again, probably can't do anything except sort of play the waiting game a little bit, but just be aware that that situation, perhaps could improve sooner than later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other comments on campaigns? Now, before we move to the last one, which is talking about the wage subsidy, is there any other fundraising initiatives that people have comments on that they thought were important, or general communications? I think the idea of touching base with your donors, and even not even talking about an ask, just touching base with them. I think that's been highly recommended. Pretty much kind of a no-brainer in that regard, and just keeping up that good relationship. Again, I think that's top of mind too. So
in Colchester, we do 2 direct mail campaigns, one in spring, one in fall. We're actually accelerating our spring appeal a little bit, probably going to drop it a month early, about the 1st of May instead of the end of May. And it will be talking about what's happening currently in our healthcare system. And one of our focuses within that, with an ask, won't be necessarily that, can you still give us the $100 or the $1,000, but because people are facing challenges. But doing more of a monthly giving kind of an ask that, could you consider giving us the same gift, but perhaps spread it over time. If you're feeling, the pain right now, that perhaps you could still make that commitment because you really want to, but we can find a different way to do it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
This is Katie with United Way here in Halifax. I just wanted to say thank you for talking about the Atlantic Compassion Fund, and thought I'd kind of point to some of the interesting things that are going on with that in case people are interested. That the fund was actually launched because a local business leader reached out to us. It was Tom Rose with Atlantic Business Interiors, who wanted to take action and support the community. And so I think what's interesting about our response is that, it has been in collaboration with a corporate partner who wanted to make a difference. And so we really kind of took the feedback and ideas from him and then realized those, and have been kind of growing it ever since. So there might be some opportunities to maybe do something similar, to really listen to what the business leaders are looking to do, and working with them. And to David's point earlier, I thought I'd note as well that we have been able to mobilize really quickly and have already started sending money into the community and to our network of agencies. So that's been a really exciting opportunity that we've really exciting kind of speed of response that we've been able to do. And we also usually have an annual workplace campaign cycle that starts in the fall. So we've been thinking about this campaign question as well, and we're really using what we're planning to use what we're doing now as conversation points for the fall. And we'll still go ahead, but if we have to shift everything online, we will. But we'll use this opportunity to kind of show donors that, through their donations to United Way, they're creating, you know, a support system in the community so that we can act when emergencies like this arise, and you know, and using it as an example of how their donations work and how, you know, more than ever their donations are important. So we're kind of going to we're using what we're doing now to tie into, you know, our annual campaigns that are really going to be what keeps our organization sustainable throughout the year, because that's not really what this fund is about. So we really need to, you know, keep the campaigns alive in the fall.
Great. Thank you for the information.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more comments before we move to the final slide? Okay, just actually, I'll send a link along a couple of sources talking about some of the ideas that talked about here about fundraising events, and some other resources that have been developed through Imagine Canada about dealing with COVID and all that good stuff. So those links will be sent along afterwards. So just a final word about the wage subsidy, and that perhaps your organization could benefit from it. You know, charities, when this came out, you know, the immediate idea was that businesses that are facing an immediate drop in revenue could be helped with the wage subsidy program, and immediately I thought, you know, how can charities access this funding given the different revenues that they rely on, and generally, unless you're offering like a fee-based type of service like the YMCA kind of thing, that perhaps you wouldn't necessarily be seeing the drop in revenue until a little bit further down the road, but you may have to lay off, you know, staff and sort of have that double whammy. So in any event, it appears that there's been some consideration given to charities and the different revenues that they rely on, that if your organization has seen a drop in your fundraising revenues, with the criteria that's been laid out, I think you know, you look at either the previous month or the previous, you know, period in last year, or you look at January, February, whatever that is, you can choose to include or exclude government funding if you do get some in your revenue calculation. So if you're an organization that has a combination of a funded program through government, but you also fundraise for your other programs and services, you can you know, work with those numbers to show that our fundraising revenues have taken a drop, and we are eligible for this wage subsidy. So something to consider. So hopefully, you know, all charities and nonprofits that are eligible for the wage subsidy and can take advantage of it are able to. So certainly suggest having a closer look at that. Also, there's we suggest looking at the Canada Summer Jobs Program. That's the opportunity perhaps gets some students helping with the organization. I think that's 100% covered. I'm pretty sure through these emergency measures. So again, something that your group could take advantage of. Has anybody looked into this closely, you know, and try to inquire about whether you're going to be able to do this or not, or any comments? Nope.
Me.
Okay.
So yeah, so we've had to lay off about 40% of our workforce because of the direct fee-based services that we provide. Folks might not know, but actually 60% of our business is government funded. So all of our immigration programming and employment programming that we run either federally or provincially funded. So all of those streams are very kind of safe and sound, which is great. But the other 40% has taken a real hit very quickly. And so just in the last week, we've seen that this wage subsidy will actually apply to us. And it's because of that excluding government funding piece, that's really a big difference. And we'll definitely, so we've just been as quick as possible trying to figure out what sort of modeling we can do, and, you know, getting our finance committee of the board together to look at it, getting our board to look at different models and different combinations of how we can get people back on payroll. So yeah, so I'm talking to my CEO tomorrow about that. So we'll see what happens. But it's all changing very, very quickly. And so you kind of have to spend a lot of time and focus on figuring out if it'll apply to you. But a lot of the parameters have been made easier in the last 5 days. So that's really good.
Great. Yeah. I mean, the obvious advantage would be specifically charities can keep their fundraising staff going and not necessarily worry about bringing in enough dollars to pay for their salary. Number one, the salary will be covered up to 75%. So then you do have the opportunity to bring in, some fundraising revenues that perhaps you wouldn't be able to bring in if you had to lay off your staff. So again, if it's worthwhile for your group to look at that, there appears to be some opportunities. So. All right. Any other comments on that or in general?
Just kind of for follow-up, because this is changing so quickly, I'd be happy to kind of update people to see how it goes. I feel like the Y is a bit of an example of things happening very quickly because of our turnaround in our finances. So I'd be happy to update folks on the next bi-weekly call about it. But also, David, this is being recorded, so this will be available for people after the fact as well. And you mentioned that you had some links, and there's a link in the slides as well to share with folks. So we can obviously send that out to everybody and make sure that you get those resources so you don't have to jot it down or anything like that.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm done.
All right. Well, I'll thank everybody for our call. Watch out for what the topic will be very soon for our next one. We'll have these every Tuesday, every second Tuesday rather, and keep it that tight hour, 12 to 1. And we'll see you next time. And thanks so much to David.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. It's nice to be connected.
Yeah.